Cold reaches your face before you fully wake. It is not the clean cold of a winter morning seen through glass. It is close, damp, and old. It moves across your cheek from the mouth of the cave, slips under the edge of a hide, and finds the thin place between your shoulder and your neck. There is no door to stop it, no wall that belongs to you, no sealed room holding warmth through the night. Only stone behind you, darkness above you, and a small bed of embers that has become too quiet. You open your eyes into a world without corners. The ceiling is rough stone. The ground beneath you is packed earth, ash, scraps of old grass, flattened skins, and places where many bodies have rested before. Somewhere nearby, someone breathes through the smoke. Someone else shifts slowly, not wanting to lose the pocket of warmth trapped beneath a hide. Outside, beyond the cave mouth, the wind moves across frozen ground and low brush, carrying the dry smell of cold steppe, animal hair, and distant snow. This is a Neanderthal shelter in Ice Age Europe, though shelter may be too simple a word, and home may be too comfortable. It is not a house in the way you know a house. It has no roof built by hands, no chimney, no private room, no bed lifted from the floor. It is a place chosen carefully from the land, improved a little by fire, skins, memory, and work, and made livable only for as long as the group keeps remaking it. That difference matters. The stone blocks the worst of the wind. The overhang keeps falling snow or hard rain from striking sleeping bodies directly. The back wall reflects a little heat from the hearth. The entrance gives a view outward, toward the pale line where morning will eventually arrive. But the same stone that protects you also holds dampness. The same hollow that shelters you also gathers smoke. The same darkness that hides you from weather can hide animals, cracks, old bones, and the uncertain shape of things beyond the firelight. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into the practical details of the past, you can like the video, subscribe, and share where you are listening from, or what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. The fire is the first thing everyone notices, even when no one speaks. Not the flames, because flames are brief and hungry, but the heart beneath them, the red places under black wood, the soft ash that can hide warmth, the small glow that decides whether the morning begins with movement or with danger. A fire in this place is not decoration. It is a tool, a boundary, a warning, a drying rack, a cooking place, a gathering point, and during the coldest hours, almost another body in the group. To sleep near it is to trust that someone has fed it well enough. A Neanderthal group living through severe cold could not treat shelter as a thing built once and forgotten. The shelter was a sequence of decisions: where to stop, which cave mouth faced too much wind, which rock shelter stayed dry after thaw, which floor could be cleared, which place had enough fuel nearby, which opening allowed smoke to leave without taking all the heat with it, which wall could hold warmth for a short time after the fire sank low. None of this required a modern floor plan. It required attention. In some places, archaeologists have found traces of repeated fires, stone tools, animal bones, and activity areas that suggest these camps were not random piles of survival. A hearth might sit where it warmed a working space. Tool-making might happen where light was better. Butchery, scraping, sleeping, and food sharing left different marks on the ground. But enough remains to show that these shelters had order. Look closer at the place around you. Near the fire are flakes of stone, sharp and pale where they were struck from a core. A scraper lies beside a stiffened piece of hide. Bits of charcoal sit in the earth like black seeds. A cracked bone rests near the warmest patch of ground. There may be dry grass or other plant matter pressed beneath skins. Not a mattress as you know one, but a barrier between the body and the earth. The hide over your body was once part of an animal that had to be followed, killed, cut, scraped, stretched, softened, smoked, carried, and kept from rot. Warmth begins long before the night becomes cold. It begins with stone edges made sharp enough to separate flesh from skin. It begins with hands working fat from a hide until the fingers ache. It begins with smoke getting into hair and clothing and the folds of skin. By the time that hide covers a sleeping child or an injured adult, or your own ribs, it has already passed through many hours of labour. It may be a skin hung near the mouth of a shelter to soften the wind. It may be brush laid low where air creeps along the ground. It may be a body sleeping close to another body. It may be a curve of stone that catches heat from the hearth. It may be nothing more than the choice to sleep on one side of the fire instead of the other. Do not sleep where the draught finds the ground. Do not place everything too close to the flame, because sparks can eat what took days to make. Do not let damp wood become the only fuel, because smoke will thicken and warmth will weaken. Do not waste the old ash, because ash can protect the living heart of the fire. Do not move carelessly in darkness, because a stone tool can cut, a coal can burn, and a sleeping body may be lying where your foot expects earth. You can feel how little privacy exists. The cold pushes everyone toward the same centre. Breath, warmth, smell, hunger, fatigue, and small discomforts are shared because separation costs heat. The old, the very young, the hurt, and the tired need the better places more urgently. A strong body can sleep nearer the draught for a while. Someone with knowledge of the fire may stay close enough to wake when the glow fades. Someone else may know which fuel smokes less, which bones crack in heat, which skins should be turned before dampness ruins them. Outside, the night is wider than the shelter. Reindeer, horses, bison, or other cold-adapted animals may pass across open country in different seasons, depending on the region and time. Predators move too, though they do not need to appear for their presence to matter. Wind presses through grasses and low shrubs. Frost grips stones. It is the reason the cave has value. Yet even now, lying close to the last heat of the hearth, you would not mistake this place for safety in the modern sense. Safety here is temporary. It has to be fed. It has to be watched. It has to be carried in memory from one cold season to the next. The embers pulse faintly under ash. A hand reaches out from beneath a hide. Not dramatically, not with fear, but with the practiced slowness of someone who has done this before. A piece of wood is nudged inward. A small breath follows. Smoke lifts, curls, and hesitates against the cave roof before finding its way toward the dark opening. For a moment, warmth returns by a finger's width. The small return of warmth does not make the cave comfortable. It only reminds every sleeping body what would happen without it. Beyond the red eye of the hearth, the air is still cold enough to tighten the skin across your hands. The cave wall behind you carries a chill that has been stored there for longer than anyone in the group has been alive. Stone does not warm quickly. It accepts heat slowly, gives it back slowly, and keeps its own deep memory of winter. If you press your palm against it, the cold seems to come through your bones rather than rest on the surface of your skin. This is why the first problem of shelter is never simply finding a roof. A roof can keep snow from falling on your face. A roof can break rain into threads and send it running down the outer rock. A roof can hide a fire's glow from some directions and hold a little darkness around a sleeping group. But cold does not only come from above. It comes sideways with wind. It rises from frozen ground. It sits inside damp stone. It creeps through gaps in hides. It waits in the ashes when the fire thins. It enters through breath, through wet feet, through hunger, through exhaustion, through every small failure to prepare before night. A cave may look like an answer from the outside. To a tired body crossing open ground, it is a dark promise in the rock. The wind breaks at its mouth. Snow gathers less deeply under the overhang. The back wall offers a place that cannot be attacked by weather from behind. There is no need to lift heavy beams, no need to weave an entire wall, no need to invent a house from nothing. The land has already made a hollow, and the group knows enough to use it. But using a cave well is not the same as crawling into a hole. The entrance matters first. If the opening faces the full force of the prevailing wind, the shelter can become a funnel. Air rushes in, gathers speed, and runs low along the ground, exactly where tired bodies need warmth most. If the entrance is too narrow, smoke may thicken until the eyes sting, and breathing becomes a quiet punishment. If the entrance is too exposed, the fire may be seen from far away. If it is too hidden, a group may lose its view of the land beyond. And in a world where animals, weather, and other humans all matter, seeing outward is part of staying alive. So the shelter begins before anyone lies down. It begins with looking. A place is judged by wind, dryness, floor, distance to fuel, distance to water, signs of animals, and the memory of earlier use. A cave floor covered in old bones may tell one story, a dry ledge may tell another. A place where water drips through the ceiling during thaw is different from one where the stone stays quiet. A hollow that feels good in autumn may become cruel in winter if the wind shifts or the ground freezes hard beneath the bedding. The group does not need words for every part of this knowledge in the way you might expect. Some of it is carried in gesture. A hand held low to feel the draught. A glance toward blackened stone from an earlier fire. A body stepping to one side of the entrance and pausing. A piece of hide lifted and tested in the moving air. A child may not know why one hollow is rejected and another is accepted, but the body learns. The body remembers where smoke gathered last time. It remembers where sleep was broken by cold. It remembers which wall gave back a little warmth after the fire burned for many hours. Inside, the cave is divided by heat more than by walls. Closest to the hearth is the place of light and risk. Sparks rise there. Smoke thickens there. Tools can be seen there. Meat can be warmed or cooked there, depending on what has been brought back and how it is prepared. Hides may dry nearby, but not so close that they burn. Wet wood may be set where heat can reach it, though damp fuel is never innocent. It spits, smokes, and wastes the patience of everyone near it. Farther from the hearth, the cave changes. Shadows become heavier. The floor becomes less certain. The warmth fades quickly, especially if the air is moving. A sleeping body placed too far back may be spared smoke, but lose heat. A body placed too near the mouth may breathe cleaner air, but feel the night searching through every covering. The best place is not always obvious. It depends on the fire, the wind, the shape of the cave, the number of bodies, the dampness of the floor, and the work that still has to be done. This is why a primitive home is not primitive in the sense of being thoughtless. It is simple only if you look at it from far away. From inside, it is full of small negotiations. One person shifts a hide closer to the child curled beside them. Another scrapes a cleared patch of ground with a foot before sitting. Someone pulls a piece of wood from the outer edge of the fuel pile and lays it near the embers to warm before it burns. A flake of stone is moved so no one rolls onto its edge in sleep. Bits of old ash are pushed into a low bank around the fire's heart. A half-dried skin is turned. A shoulder leans into another shoulder. The group becomes part of the architecture. The cave gives the hard shape. The people make the living shape. If there are skins or branches arranged near the entrance, they do not become a perfect door. They flutter, sag, leak cold, and carry smell. A hide stiffened by freezing air may not hang neatly. Brush may slow the wind, but not stop it. Stones can hold something in place, but they also steal heat from fingers that touch them too long. Still, even an imperfect barrier changes the night. It breaks the force of moving air. It creates a pocket where smoke and warmth behave differently. It marks the difference between the open world and the place where the group has chosen to gather. A modern room hides these decisions from you. The wall stands whether you think about it or not. The window holds its glass. The floor stays mostly dry. Heat arrives through a system buried in pipes, wires, fuel, or machines. You can sleep while the structure works on your behalf. Here, the structure has to be helped. The cave does not promise warmth. It offers a chance to keep some warmth from escaping too quickly. That is all. The rest must be made from fuel. Hides, bedding, placement, and attention. And every part has a cost. Fuel has to be gathered when hands are already cold. Hides have to be prepared before they can protect anyone. Bedding has to be collected, carried, replaced, or shaken free of dampness. A hearth has to be tended without letting smoke ruin the shelter. Even choosing the wrong corner can turn a long night into a slow draining of strength. As the fire catches the new wood, the light rises along the cave wall. For a moment, shapes appear. The curve of a sleeping back, the uneven edge of a hide, the dark stain above the hearth where smoke has touched stone again and again. Then the flame lowers, and the shadows return. Outside, the wind continues past the mouth of the cave. Inside, the group has not escaped the cold. It has only slowed it down. Inside the cave, the first real wall is not stone. It is firelight. It reaches only a short distance. But within that distance, the world changes. A hand can find a tool. A child can see the shape of a sleeping shoulder. A strip of hide can be lifted from the ground and shaken free of frost. Beyond the glow, the same cave continues into darkness, but it no longer belongs fully to the living. It belongs to echoes, cold corners, old bones, and the slow breath of stone. The hearth makes a centre. This is one of the oldest ideas of shelter, and one of the easiest to miss. A home does not begin only when a wall is built. It begins when space is arranged around something that must be protected. For a Neanderthal group in a cold season, that something is heat. The fire decides where people sit, where they sleep, where hides dry, where tools are repaired, where food is handled, and where the night feels almost bearable. A hearth is not just burning wood. It is chosen ground, too close to the cave mouth, and the wind worries the flame, pushes smoke backward, and steals heat before it can gather. Too deep inside, and smoke may linger against the roof, thickening the air until every breath tastes bitter. Too near the sleeping place, and sparks can ruin hides or wake a body with pain. Too far away, and the warmth becomes a story told by light rather than something the skin can use. So the hearth is placed where the cave, the wind, and the group can make a temporary agreement. The ground around it is marked by use. Ash softens one patch of earth. Charcoal darkens another. Bones crack and whiten near heat. Stone flakes collect where someone has sat long enough to work by the glow. A scraper may be held low in one hand while the other pulls a stiff edge of hide across it. The movement is patient, repetitive, and necessary. Each pull removes what should not remain. Each small improvement may make the hide more useful later, when a child needs covering or a wind gap needs closing. The fire gives light to this work, but it also gives deadlines. Wood burns down, embers sink, smoke shifts with wind. A piece of fuel that seemed dry can begin to hiss, then smoulder, then fill the shelter with a grey discomfort no one can ignore. If the group has carried branches, roots, or other burnable material from outside, that fuel must be rationed by judgment rather than measured by any modern clock. Too much at once and heat is wasted. Too little and the cold starts taking back the shelter. The old replacement for a modern room is not one object, it is a chain. The cave mouth slows the weather, the hearth thickens the warmth, the stone wall catches a little heat and returns it weakly after the flame lowers. The hide keeps warmed air near the skin, the bedding lifts the body from the cold floor. The group's closeness reduces what each person loses alone. Ash guards the red heart of the fire when the night is long. None of these things is enough by itself. Together, they become a kind of dwelling. This is why calling it primitive can mislead you. The materials are rough, but the system is careful. A badly placed fire can turn a shelter against the people inside it. A badly dried hide can rot, stiffen, or smell so strongly that it becomes a problem of its own. Bedding laid on damp ground can steal warmth faster than bare earth seems able to. A good cave can be made miserable by the wrong wind. A poor hollow can become useful if the fire draws well and the floor stays dry. Here, shelter is not ownership, it is performance. The group performs it again and again, with hands, breath, memory, and fatigue. Someone wakes enough to push a coal inward. Someone moves a hide from the smoke before it blackens too deeply. Someone carries a small branch closer with slow care, avoiding the bodies laid near the warmth. Someone knows that a certain corner grows colder before dawn. Someone else has learned where the roof sends drops after a thaw. These are not decorations around survival. They are survival. The old system also has sounds. A green twig ticks as it heats. A coal collapses into itself with a soft sigh. A sleeper coughs once, then turns away from the smoke. Hide creaks where it has dried unevenly. Stone clicks against stone as a tool is moved in the dark. Outside, the wind does not roar all the time. Sometimes it thins into a narrow sound at the cave mouth, the kind of sound that tells everyone the air is finding a gap. That gap matters. A small opening near the ground can empty warmth from a shelter more cruelly than a wide darkness above. Cold air moves low. It slides along the floor, under hides, through loose brush, between stones. To stop it completely would require materials and construction beyond what this place can give. But to slow it, to confuse it, to turn it aside for one night, that is possible. A hide may be weighted with stones. Branches may be leaned where the wind cuts inward. Packs of material may be set along the edge of a sleeping place. Bodies may be arranged with the strongest nearer the draft and the more vulnerable closer to the centre. The cave wall, the fire, the hide, and the human body all become parts of one imperfect barrier. Nothing here is separate. The tool that scraped the hide belongs to the wall that hide becomes. The animal that fed the group also covers the group. The ash that dirties the floor protects the ember that warms the next morning. The smoke that stings the eyes helps dry skins. The cave that seems natural becomes changed by every night spent inside it. Over time, use writes itself into the place. Black stains climb above repeated fires. Trampled earth grows different from untouched earth. Broken bones gather in certain areas. Edges of stone are discarded where hands worked. Perhaps the group returns to the same shelter in another season, or perhaps another group finds the marks and understands enough to use the place again. The cave does not become a house with a name, but it becomes known. It becomes a place where certain actions fit. For a tired listener, imagining home as walls and rooms, this is the hardest turn to make. The Neanderthal home is not a fixed object waiting at the end of a day. It is an arrangement that has to be brought into being. It appears when the hearth is fed, when the hides are placed, when the bedding is chosen, when the wind is answered, when bodies settle around warmth in ways learned by experience. And when those actions stop, the home begins to disappear. The fire sinks, the hide stiffens, the smoke thins. The cave becomes only stone again. The cold does not need to break a door or climb a wall. It only has to wait for the system to weaken. Near the hearth, someone turns in sleep and draws a covering closer to the throat. The movement is small, barely more than a rustle. But in that rustle is the whole story of the shelter. An animal skin changed by labour, a body seeking heat, a fire holding its last brightness, and a cave that becomes home only because the living refuse to let the cold have everything at once. The material reality of the shelter begins under your body. Before the cave can feel like a place to rest, the ground has to be answered. Earth, stone, ash, old scraps of plants, broken bone, and flattened hide do not receive a sleeping body kindly. They press upward. They hold dampness. They remember the cold of the night before. Even when a fire has burned for hours, the floor beyond its closest warmth can remain hard and patient, drawing heat out of hips, shoulders, knees, and feet. This is one of the quietest dangers in a cold shelter. The air may feel warmer near the hearth, and the face may feel the comfort of flame, but the ground keeps taking from below. So the floor is not simply the floor. It is a problem to be softened, lifted, dried, covered, and chosen with care. A Neanderthal shelter in winter may use whatever the surrounding country gives: hides, grass, leaves, moss, bark, brush, old ash, or dry plant matter if it can be found and kept usable. Not every site preserves such things well. Much of this softer world disappears before archaeology can see it clearly. But the logic of the body remains. No one who sleeps night after night in cold country ignores the ground. A hide laid beneath the body does more than comfort the bones. It creates a small boundary between flesh and earth. A layer of dry grass or plant fibres can trap a little air. A patch of ash may be warmer and drier than raw soil. A place near the stone wall may be protected from footsteps but colder than expected. A place near the entrance may seem cleaner until the low draft begins moving beneath the coverings. Every sleeping spot has a cost. The materials around you are not clean in the modern sense. They are smoky, greasy, dusty, and alive with use. A hide may smell of the animal it came from, of smoke, fat, old rain, and the hands that worked it. Plant bedding may carry the sharp green scent of stems when fresh, then sour slightly if it grows damp. Ash clings to skin, charcoal marks fingers. Hair catches smoke until the whole group carries the hearth with them, even away from the cave. But cleanliness, here, is not the first measurement. Dryness matters more. Warmth matters more. The difference between a damp skin and a dry one can change the night. Damp material pulls heat away and holds cold close. Dry material traps air, bends around the body, and makes a small chamber of warmth beneath the covering. In extreme cold, the useful thing is not always the pleasant thing. It is the thing that keeps the body working until morning. The hide itself is a shelter within the shelter. Imagine the labour inside it. A sharp flake opens the skin. A heavier tool works at joints. A scraper removes clinging tissue. Hands pull, stretch, fold, and turn. Fat has to be dealt with. Wetness has to be managed. If smoke is used to help preserve or dry a skin, then the same smoke that stings the eyes becomes part of the shelter's future warmth. The animal's body is transformed into a movable wall, a blanket, a ground cover, a wrapping, a windbreak, or a bundle for carrying other things. This is why a Neanderthal home cannot be separated from hunting, butchery, tool-making, and repair. The shelter is made from the same world that feeds the group: bone, hide, sinew, wood, stone, ash, fat, and plant matter pass through different jobs. Nothing is only one thing. A bone may hold marrow, then become fuel in some conditions, or lie near the fire as refuse. A hide may cover a sleeper, then hang to dry, then be dragged toward the entrance to slow air. A stone edge may cut meat in the afternoon and scrape skin before night. Cold forces materials to become flexible in meaning. The cave wall is hard, but even stone has a role beyond blocking wind. Near the hearth, rock may absorb a little heat and give it back slowly. Never enough to make the shelter truly warm, but enough to matter in the close space where bodies gather. A low stone may hold a hide in place. A natural ledge may keep tools dry. A shallow hollow may collect ash. A flatter patch may become a repeated working place, because it offers a stable surface in a world with very few. Wood is another problem disguised as an answer. Fire needs it, but not all wood behaves the same. Dry wood is easier, hotter, cleaner. Damp wood hisses, smokes, and sulks before it burns. Small sticks give quick flame and vanish. Larger pieces may hold heat longer, if the hearth can take them and if the group can gather them. In a cold open landscape, fuel is not always abundant in the way a forest dweller might imagine. The search for burnable material can shape movement, camp choice, and how long a shelter remains useful. Every piece of fuel is also carried weight. A branch brought back to the cave is warmth not yet released. A bundle of brush is time stored against darkness. A dry root pulled from frozen ground may mean smoke, effort, and a few more hours of heat. The group must decide what to burn now, what to save, what to dry near the hearth, and what is too wet or too precious to waste. These decisions are not dramatic from the outside. They happen in small gestures, a hand holding back one branch, another pushing a charred end inward, someone setting damp pieces where warmth can prepare them for later. Even the air becomes material. Warm air rises toward the roof and may not stay where sleeping bodies need it. Smoke follows paths shaped by the cave's ceiling, the entrance, the wind outside, and the size of the fire. If the smoke moves well, the shelter breathes. If it stalls, the cave fills with irritation. Eyes water, throats tighten, sleep becomes shallow. A place that blocks wind too well can also trap what the fire produces. A place that clears smoke too easily may also lose precious heat. There is no perfect balance, only adjustment. A hide is moved, a fire is lowered, fuel changes. Someone shifts away from the smoke line. Another person chooses the colder edge because breathing there is easier. The shelter teaches through discomfort. A draft on the ankles, smoke in the eyes, dampness under the hip, sparks near a skin, cold stone against the back. Each small complaint becomes information. By many nights of such information, a group learns how to make rough materials cooperate. Not permanently, not beautifully, not evenly for everyone, but enough. Enough for a child to sleep through part of the night. Enough for stiff fingers to loosen near flame. Enough for wet hide to become usable again. Enough for tools to be repaired before morning movement. Enough for the body to keep its heat while the world outside remains larger, colder, and indifferent. The shelter is primitive only if you ignore the work hidden in every object. Under the hide, your own warmth gathers slowly. Beneath you, the bedding keeps a little of the floor away. Beside you, ash breathes faint heat around the coals. Above you, smoke darkens stone that has watched many nights like this one. The cave has not changed into a house, but the materials inside it have been persuaded, for a few hours, to behave like home. Warmth is never shared evenly. Even in a small group, gathered around the same fire, the shelter has better places and worse places. The difference may be only the length of an arm, or the width of one sleeping body. But in a cold night, that small distance matters. Near the hearth, the skin loosens. Fingers bend more easily. Breath feels less sharp. A hide grows softer where heat reaches it. Farther away, the floor hardens again. The air cools, and the body begins its slow work of defending itself. A modern house hides inequality behind rooms, switches, and closed doors. This older shelter cannot hide it. The map of comfort is visible in the way bodies settle. Someone sleeps nearer the warmest ground. Someone else lies closer to the draft. A child may be tucked between larger bodies, not because the shelter is tender in any sentimental way, but because small bodies lose heat quickly. An injured person, or someone exhausted from walking, may need the safer place near the center. A strong hunter, a practiced gatherer of fuel, or an older body used to broken sleep may take the edge, where cold air enters first. These arrangements may not be spoken as rules. They may be made through habit, pressure, need, and memory. The fire creates a kind of social weather. Closest to it are the hands still working. A stone edge moves against hide. A piece of wood is turned. A bone is nudged aside. Someone checks whether damp material can be brought nearer without smoking too badly. Someone watches the way sparks travel when a branch settles into the coals. These small jobs keep a person half awake while others sink into sleep. To be near the fire is not only to receive warmth, it is also to be responsible for it. That is one of the quiet truths of a cold shelter. Comfort creates duty. The person nearest the embers may wake more often. Smoke may find their eyes first. Sparks may land closer to their hands. They may be the one who notices the fire thinning, the one who reaches from under a hide to move fuel inward, the one who listens when wind changes at the cave mouth. Their place is warmer, but their sleep is lighter. Their body becomes part of the hearth's memory. Farther back, someone may sleep more deeply, shielded from sparks and smoke, but at a cost. Stone behind them sends cold through the air. The ground beneath them may not have dried fully. Their covering may hold less warmth. If the fire sinks too low, they will feel it later, but more completely, waking with shoulders tight and knees drawn toward the chest. Comfort and discomfort do not sit still. They shift with the fire, the wind, the hour, and the needs of the group. In a Neanderthal shelter, there is no private bedroom where one person can shut out the breathing of others. The group is close because the cold makes distance expensive. Privacy belongs less to walls than to the simple act of turning your face away. A person may sleep with another's foot near their leg, a child's breath near their arm, an older body coughing softly somewhere in the smoke. Smell, warmth, fatigue, and small irritations are shared because separation would waste heat. This closeness can feel strange if you imagine home as a place of personal space. But in extreme cold, the body understands what the mind may resist. Another body is a wall that breathes. Another shoulder can slow the loss of heat. A cluster of sleepers changes the air beneath hides. The group makes a warmer shape than one person can make alone. Even so, closeness does not erase difference. Some bodies need more. Children cannot gather fuel with the same strength as adults. Older members may carry knowledge that keeps the shelter working, yet their joints may suffer more from cold ground. Someone wounded by a fall, a hunt, or ordinary hardship may need the place where heat is most stable. A person who has worked hard outside may return with clothing or coverings stiff from moisture, and if that dampness is not managed, their cold spreads into the shelter with them. The shelter has to decide who gets protected first. But it does not decide like a written law. It decides through movement. A hide is pulled over one sleeper more fully than another. A space is made without announcement. A body shifts to block a draft. A fuel bundle is set nearer the person tending the fire. A child is moved away from smoke. An older person is given the warmer side of a skin. These gestures are small enough to disappear from archaeological evidence, but they are the kinds of choices that make survival social rather than merely physical. The cave itself may remember none of this clearly. It may preserve ash, tools, bones, and darkened stone, but not the reason one person slept slightly closer to the hearth. It may hold the mark of repeated fire, but not the moment someone gave up a warmer place. It may keep the scraper, but not the hand that used it late into the night, so another body could sleep under a better hide. The emotional life of shelter leaves few hard traces. Still, the pattern is not difficult to understand. In cold, warmth becomes a resource, and every resource creates relationships. The best place by the fire is useful only because someone gathered fuel. The hide that covers one body exists because others help turn animal skin into shelter. The dry bedding beneath a sleeper came from a landscape searched and carried back by hands. The safe side of the cave was chosen because someone remembered wind, dampness, and animal signs. Nothing in the shelter is truly individual. Even the warmth nearest your chest has passed through other bodies' labour before it reaches you. This is why the idea of a primitive home should not be imagined as a lonely cave with a single figure crouched beside a flame. That picture is too simple. The shelter is a network of dependence. Heat depends on wood. Wood depends on walking. Hides depend on animals, tools, scraping, drying, and care. Sleep depends on trust. The person closing their eyes depends on the person who will wake when the embers fade. At the edge of the firelight, a sleeper turns and exposes one arm to the air. The skin reacts before the mind does. The arm withdraws beneath the covering. Near the entrance, another body shifts against the low movement of wind. The hide barrier trembles slightly, weighted by stones but never fully still. Someone half wakes, listens, and decides whether the sound means danger, weather, or only the ordinary breathing of the night. No one is comfortable in the modern sense, but some are less cold than others. Some sleep longer, some wake more often, some breathe more smoke, some bear more draught. Some carry the day's work into the night through aching hands and sore legs. The shelter gathers them all together, but it does not make them equal, and yet this unevenness is part of how the home survives. The warmest place cannot be given to everyone at once. The driest hide cannot cover every shoulder. The cleanest air may be colder, and the warmest air may be smoky. The group must keep adjusting, not toward perfect fairness, but toward morning. A small compromise here, a shift of bedding there, a hand reaching out to settle a hide over a smaller body, a tired watcher feeding the fire one more time. The cave mouth remains dark. The wind presses softly against the rough barrier. Inside, the fire lowers again, and the shelter's map changes with it. The warm circle shrinks by a little. Bodies draw closer without waking fully. The group becomes a tighter shape around the last dependable heat. And for a while, that living shape is the strongest wall they have. The longer a shelter is used, the more it becomes a routine. Not a routine in the modern sense, with hours written down and tasks named clearly, but a pattern carried by bodies. The same hand reaches for fuel before the fire weakens too far. The same kind of hide is moved away from sparks. The same corner is avoided after thaw because dampness gathers there. The same narrow path from entrance to hearth stays open because feet have learned it in darkness. What looks, from far away, like rough living is held together by repetition. In deep cold, repetition is a kind of wall. Each evening, the shelter has to be made ready again. The day has brought in weather, hunger, wetness, fatigue, animal remains, broken tools, fresh fuel, and the smells of movement outside. Nothing enters the cave without changing it. Snow carried on feet melts near warmth and becomes damp ground. A hide used outside may stiffen, then soften, then steam slightly near the fire. Tools used for cutting or scraping are brought back with edges that may need attention. Fuel gathered in haste may be mixed, some pieces dry enough to burn cleanly, others carrying hidden moisture that will announce itself later in smoke. Before real rest can happen, the shelter must be corrected. The fire area is cleared in small ways. A piece of bone is pushed aside. Ash is gathered or spread. Charred ends are turned inward. The usable fuel is separated from the troublesome fuel by touch, weight, sound, and experience. Someone may hold a branch close to the warmth without feeding it to the flame yet, letting heat pull moisture from it slowly. Someone else may move a sleeping skin away from drifting sparks, because one careless ember can eat a hole in many hours of work. These actions are quiet, almost invisible, but the night depends on them. A cave does not become livable because people enter it. It becomes livable because they repeat the right small acts until the space begins to behave. The bedding must be renewed or shaken. The driest materials should be kept from the wettest ground. Hides need to be turned, folded, spread, or hung where smoke and heat can reach them without destroying them. Sharp stones must not be left where a sleeper may roll onto them. Food scraps and bones cannot simply vanish. They remain as smell, mess, fuel, tool, material, or trouble, depending on what is done with them. A modern home absorbs neglect for a while. This older shelter does not. If the fire is neglected, cold returns quickly. If dampness is ignored, bedding fails. If smoke is misunderstood, sleep breaks into coughing and watering eyes. If fuel is wasted in the first part of the night, the hardest hours before dawn become more dangerous. The routine is not about neatness, It is about keeping small failures from joining together. You can imagine the evening as a slow tightening of the shelter's shape. At first, people move in and out. The entrance is active. Cold air follows each body. A piece of wood is carried in. A hide is dragged closer. A tool is lifted, used, set down, lifted again. The fire brightens as work gathers around it. Shadows move broadly on the cave wall. There is still the restless feeling of the day inside the night. Then, little by little, the shelter narrows. The outer ground is crossed less often. The fire is fed with more care. The best coverings are pulled into use. Bodies settle into places learned by repeated cold. The sounds grow smaller, scraping, breathing, a coal shifting, a foot brushing ash, the dry click of stone. If the wind changes, someone notices. If smoke lowers, someone shifts. If a child or smaller body stirs from cold, a covering may be adjusted before full waking is needed. This is not comfort as idleness, it is comfort as maintenance. For Neanderthals living across harsh seasonal landscapes, survival depended on knowing how to use a place without expecting it to serve forever. A cave or rock shelter could be returned to, remembered, improved by use, and marked by repeated fires. But it was still part of a larger, moving life. Animals moved, weather changed, fuel could become scarce, a nearby water source could freeze or shift. The group's needs might pull them elsewhere. Even the best shelter was not a permanent escape from the land around it. That makes routine even more important, not less. If home is temporary, the body must know how to make it quickly. Where should the first fire go? Which material belongs beneath the body? Which hide should hang, and which should cover? Which signs show that another animal used the shelter before? Which old ash can help a new fire? Which part of the floor is dry because it is truly dry, and which part only seems dry because the cold has hardened it? Knowledge like this does not need to be stored in carved instructions. It lives in practice. A younger member of the group learns by watching what older bodies do. They see that no one lies directly where water has darkened the ground. They see hands test the draft near the entrance. They see a hide weighted at one edge and left open at another, not from carelessness, but because smoke must still escape. They see that embers are not treated as dead things. They are covered, uncovered, fed, and coaxed. They see that fire is not only made, it is kept. Keeping is a different skill from making. A bright flame can be impressive, but a low, durable heat is what carries a shelter through the night. Too much flame may waste fuel and throw sparks. Too little attention may leave only grey ash when red heat is needed. Banking embers, feeding small pieces at the right time, choosing which fuel to save, and protecting the hearth from careless movement are all part of the same old discipline. The fire teaches patience because cold punishes hurry. Routine also gives the group a shared sense of where things belong. The scraper near the hide workplace, the useful stone core away from sleeping bodies, the driest fuel close enough to reach but not so close that sparks find it, the bedding kept back from the entrance draft, the warmest centre left open enough for work before it becomes sleep. These arrangements may change from shelter to shelter, but the logic travels. Heat in the middle, smoke watched above, dampness kept low and away, sharpness controlled, vulnerable bodies protected, fuel respected. The more often the pattern succeeds, the more natural it feels. And yet the routine is never mindless. Every night asks a slightly different question. A colder wind, wetter hides, less fuel, more fatigue, a restless child, a wounded limb, a cave floor disturbed by earlier use. The routine is a guide, not a guarantee. It gives the group a way to begin answering the night before the night becomes overwhelming. Outside, darkness deepens beyond the cave mouth. The land gives no sign that it understands the labour inside. Frost forms where breath does not reach. Brush stiffens. Stones cool under the open sky. Somewhere beyond the firelight, the world remains as it was, wide, hard, and unsoftened. Inside, hands repeat what has worked before. A covering is pulled close. Ash is shaped around the ember bed. A tool is moved from the sleeping place. A piece of fuel waits near the heat, drying for later. The group settles into the pattern again, not because the shelter is finished, but because the shelter is always being finished. Each small act adds another thin layer between the body and the cold, and by the time silence returns, the cave has become something more than stone for one more night. Near the fire, the smallest objects carry the most weight. A scraper lying in the ash-coloured dirt does not look like much from a distance. It may be only a shaped piece of stone, held comfortably in the hand, with an edge made useful by careful striking and retouching. But in the shelter, that edge belongs to warmth. It belongs to hides that can be cleaned, skins that can be softened, sinew that can be separated, wood that can be worked, and meat that can be divided before cold makes every task harder. A tool is not separate from the home. It is one of the ways the home keeps forming. The Neanderthal shelter depends on work that happens close to the body. A hand grips stone, a thumb presses, a wrist turns, a hide is pulled tight across the knee or against the ground. The scraper travels again and again along a surface that resists it. Too much force may tear, too little leaves what should be removed. The movement has to be learned by touch as much as sight, especially when the firelight changes and smoke lowers across the working space. You can hear this work if you listen beneath the wind, a dry rasp, a pause, a breath through the nose. Stone against skin, not sharply, but with a dull insistence. A flake lifted and set aside. A hand wiped against a thigh. The hide stiffens where it has cooled and loosens where it has warmed. If it is too close to the fire, it risks damage. Too far, and it stays stubborn. The worker shifts it slightly, using the fire as an assistant that must never be trusted completely. Every useful object in the shelter has this kind of tension inside it. The hide that covers a sleeping body is warmth, but it is also smell, labour, animal memory, and maintenance. The bedding beneath the hip is softness, but it is also something that can grow damp, scatter, rot, or collect dirt. The branch feeding the fire is heat, but also smoke, weight, and walking. The stone tool is strength, but also danger if left where a foot can find it in darkness. Even ash, which looks like waste, can protect an ember and dry a patch of ground. A modern home tries to make objects single purpose. A bed is a bed. A wall is a wall. A blanket is a blanket. Here, almost nothing has only one job. A hide may begin the evening as a ground covering, then become a wrap around shoulders, then be lifted to block a draught near the entrance, then be pulled back over a child when the fire lowers. A stone may hold down the edge of that hide, then serve as a seat, then be warmed near the hearth and moved with care. A length of wood may be fuel, support, tool handle, or barrier. A bone may be food remains, tool material, fuel in some conditions, or a sign that the floor needs clearing. The home is a changing use of things. This is why micro-behaviours matter. They are the true hinges of the shelter. Someone nudges a sharp flake away from the bedding without fully looking. Someone shakes frost or grit from a skin before laying it down again. Someone tucks a loose edge beneath their own side so moving air cannot lift it. Someone cups a hand near the fire, not only to warm fingers, but to feel whether the heat is strong enough for a task. Someone smells a piece of damp material and decides it should not come too close to the sleeping place. These gestures are not dramatic enough to become legends, but they are exactly the gestures a cold night requires. A body surviving here is always measuring, not with numbers, but with nerves. The hand measures heat before the mind names it. The nose measures smoke. The heel measures damp earth. The back measures how far the stone wall has kept its chill. The eye measures the brightness under ash. The ear measures the wind at the cave mouth. A person who has survived many winters does not need to explain every measurement. They move because their body already knows what a small change can become. The shelter teaches through repetition, and tools teach through wear. A stone edge grows dull. It must be refreshed or replaced. A handle, if one is used, may loosen. A working surface becomes slick or stiff depending on what passes over it. The hand learns which edge is still good enough for hide and which edge is better kept for cutting. In the half-light of the cave, objects are known by shape, weight, and familiar placement as much as by sight. A tool left in the wrong place is not only untidy, it interrupts memory. Order here is practical, not decorative. Near the hearth, there may be a place where stoneworking happens more often, because the light is better and the ground is stable. Another place may hold refuse, though not in the clean separation a modern person might expect. A sleeping area may be kept as clear as the conditions allow, because a body turning in darkness is vulnerable. If the cave has been used before, old patterns may guide new ones. A patch of blackened earth invites another fire. A dry hollow invites bedding. A flat stone invites work. This kind of organisation does not need straight lines. It is organised by warmth, reach, danger, and habit. What must be used at night stays close. What smells too strongly may be pushed outward. What must dry approaches the heat. What must not burn stays beyond sparks. What must not cut sleeping skin is moved away by memory. The shelter is arranged around what bodies need next. Look at the hands again. Neanderthal hands were powerful, but power alone does not make a shelter. Strength can carry fuel, break wood, move stone, hold an animal part steady. But the shelter also needs restraint, the ability to keep an ember alive instead of building a wasteful blaze, the patience to scrape a hide before it becomes useless, the care to place a covering where it slows air rather than smothers the fire, the judgment to use a good tool for the right task and not destroy it through impatience. Cold rewards skill that may appear ordinary. A watcher near the fire may notice that the smoke is beginning to lower, not because the air has changed visibly to everyone, but because the throat tightens in a familiar way. A sleeper may pull their feet closer before waking, because the draft has slipped under the hide. A person working stone may turn their body so chips fall away from the bedding. Someone feeding the hearth may choose a smaller piece of wood first, waiting for the larger one until the ember bed is ready. Small decisions accumulate until they become shelter. And all of this happens without the clean separation between inside work and outside work. The cave holds the night, but the tools carry the day into it. The scraper remembers the animal. The hide remembers the hunt. The fuel remembers the walk back through cold air. The bedding remembers the place where it was gathered. Even the ash remembers earlier fires, earlier meals, earlier nights when other bodies watched the same glow sink and rise again. When you lie near the hearth, covered by a skin made usable through these many acts, you are not resting under a simple blanket. You are resting under a chain of decisions. The edge that scraped it, the hands that dried it, the smoke that preserved it, the stones that held it, the body that yielded it, the fire that warms it now. Primitive, then, is the wrong word if it means careless. The shelter is rough, yes. It leaks cold. It smells of smoke. It cannot promise clean air or private sleep. But every object near the fire has been drawn into a system of use. A coal settles and sends up a small thread of sparks. Someone lifts a hide before the sparks can reach it. The movement is quick, quiet, and almost forgotten as soon as it is done. Yet in that brief lift of the hand, the whole shelter appears. Stone, fire, skin, tool, labour, memory, and the calm intelligence of surviving one more cold hour. The deeper truth of the shelter appears only after you stop looking for a house. At first, the eye wants walls. It wants a roof, a doorway, a bed, a room, a structure that can be named and pointed to from the outside. It wants something built once, standing in the landscape, waiting for its people to return. But the longer you remain inside this cave, the clearer it becomes that the home is not one object at all. It is the repeated arrangement of warmth, labour, bodies, tools, coverings, and memory. The cave is only the shell. The real dwelling is the pattern inside it. A fire placed where it can breathe. A hide set where the wind tries to enter. Bedding chosen for dryness rather than softness. Tools kept near light but away from sleeping skin. Fuel warmed before burning. Children and weaker bodies drawn toward the centre. Smoke watched as carefully as weather. Ash treated not as dirt, but as a keeper of heat. These things together make the shelter. Remove enough of them, and the cave becomes only a cold hollow in stone. This is the turning point in understanding Neanderthal homes. They were not primitive because they lacked intelligence. They were primitive only in the older sense of being early, direct, and made from what the world allowed. Their shelter did not defeat the environment, it negotiated with it. The cave gave shade from snow and wind. Fire gave heat and risk. Hides gave insulation and smell. Bedding gave separation from the ground and demanded renewal. Bodies gave warmth and needed protection. Every piece helped, but every piece asked something in return. A modern house works even when you forget most of it. You can be distracted, tired, careless, and still the walls remain. The roof stays above you, the door closes. Heat may come from a system you barely understand. Privacy is built into the plan. The structure carries much of the burden. In this older world, the burden stays close to the body. If the wind changes, you know it. If smoke lowers, you feel it in your eyes. If the bedding dampens, your hip and shoulder learn before morning. If fuel runs short, the shelter shrinks around the fading hearth. If a hide slips loose near the entrance, cold air writes its message along the floor. There is no hidden machine to forgive neglect. The home must be noticed in order to exist. This makes the shelter strangely alive, not alive like an animal, but alive as a relationship. It changes when the fire changes. It changes when the wind turns. It changes when one person wakes and another sleeps. It changes when a child kicks free of a covering, when a damp hide is moved nearer the heat, when a piece of wood collapses into coals, when smoke finds a new path along the roof. The shelter is never finished. It is always becoming more useful or less useful. The group lives inside that movement. Imagine the same place at different hours. In the late afternoon, the cave mouth is busy. Light still reaches the entrance. Objects are carried in. Bodies move upright. Tools are visible. Smoke begins to mark the air. The shelter is open to the day's work. Later, as darkness thickens outside, the fire becomes stronger in the eye. The outer world begins to vanish. The cave grows smaller around the hearth. The same objects are rearranged for night. Fuel closer. Sharp edges moved. Coverings spread. Sleeping places chosen. By the deepest cold before dawn, the shelter has become something else again. It is no longer a workplace. Not fully. It is a cluster of bodies, embers, ash, coverings, and guarded breath. The fire is low enough that light no longer fills the cave. It shows only pieces. A hand, a shoulder, the lifted edge of a hide, the black shape of wood not yet burned, the pale surface of a stone tool left near the hearth. The cave roof receives smoke slowly now. The entrance is a darker darkness. In those hours, architecture is almost nothing. Arrangement is everything. Where the bodies lie matters. Where the embers remain matters. Where the draft enters matters. Which material is dry matters. Which person wakes easily matters. The shelter's intelligence is distributed across all of this. It is not in a blueprint. It is in habit, attention, and the memory of discomfort. A night that went badly teaches. A corner that froze someone's feet is remembered. A smoky fire that ruined sleep is remembered. A hide burned by sparks is remembered. Survival edits the shelter over time. This is why one should be careful with the phrase built homes. Neanderthals could modify space. They could use fire, organize activity areas, work hides, choose shelters, and in some cases, create structures that show planning and effort. But the ordinary cold weather home was probably less like a constructed building and more like a practiced occupation of a place. The building was partly natural, partly made, and partly behavioral. A wall might be stone, a wall might be hide, a wall might be warmth held between sleeping bodies, a wall might be the habit of not letting the fire die. Once you see this, the cave becomes less simple. The entrance is no longer just an opening. It is the place where outside and inside argue all night. The hearth is no longer just fire. It is the centre of social space and the measure of time. The bedding is no longer just something under the body. It is a small technology of insulation. The smoke stain is no longer just dirt on stone. It is the mark of repeated attempts to make cold air livable. The scattered stone flakes are no longer only tool waste. They are the remains of hands maintaining the shelter's soft parts. The home is visible in fragments because it was lived in fragments. Archaeology may preserve the durable pieces: stone, bone, charcoal, ash, burned earth, marked floors. It may lose the most intimate parts: breath, warmth, hair, soft bedding, the exact placement of sleeping bodies, the reason the child was moved closer to the centre, the moment someone woke before dawn to save the ember bed. What survives is enough to tell us that the shelter was organised, but not enough to let us pretend we can know every night in full. The uncertainty should not make the scene empty, it should make it more honest. We can stand close to the evidence and still speak carefully. We can imagine cold without inventing a floor plan. We can feel the importance of hides without claiming every group used them in the same way. We can understand that caves were useful without pretending all Neanderthals lived in caves all the time. We can see intelligence in the arrangement without turning it into a modern cabin. The shelter's deepest lesson is humbler than that. Home, in this world, is not a possession. It is an event. It happens when the right place meets the right work at the right moment. It happens when fire is kept, not merely lit. It happens when a skin becomes a boundary, when ash becomes protection, when stone becomes a heat reflector, when bodies become a shared wall against the cold. It happens for a night, perhaps for many nights, perhaps in the same place across seasons. But it is never fully owned by the people inside it. The cold is always just outside the agreement. Near the hearth, the ember bed dims and brightens under its cover of ash. A sleeper's breath lifts the edge of a hide, then lets it fall. Someone turns slightly toward the warmth, and another body answers by shifting closer. No one names this as architecture. No one needs to. The cave, the fire, the skins, the tools, and the sleeping group have made a home together, not by becoming permanent, but by holding one another in place until morning can arrive. The evidence for a shelter like this is both intimate and incomplete. Stone lasts. Bone lasts. Charcoal can last. Burnt earth can keep a memory of heat long after every voice has vanished. But the softest parts of the home, the very parts that touched the body most closely, are often the first to disappear. Hides decay, plant bedding collapses into the soil, smoke thins into the air, breath leaves nothing behind. The exact placement of sleeping bodies is almost never preserved. A hand adjusting a covering in the dark does not become a fossil, so the story has to be told carefully. The cave floor may show hearths, ash lenses, charcoal, broken animal bones, and stone tools. It may show that people came back more than once, or used certain places repeatedly for burning, cutting, working, and discarding. It may suggest that space was organised, that the hearth was not random, that tasks clustered around heat and light. But it cannot always tell us who slept where, who woke first, who carried the driest fuel, or who gave up a warmer place to someone smaller or weaker. The silence of the evidence is not emptiness. It is a boundary. Inside that boundary, a careful imagination can move, but it must not run too far ahead. Neanderthals did not leave written plans of their shelters. They did not leave drawings explaining where a hide was hung to slow wind, or how bedding was arranged near a hearth. Many materials that would have mattered most in cold survival were organic, fragile, and easily lost. If a hide rotted away, if grass bedding decomposed, if a wooden support vanished, the stone and ash left behind may look poorer than the living place once was. This is one reason older shelters can seem simpler than they were. What survives is often the hard skeleton of a soft world. The scraper remains, but not the skin it worked. The hearth remains, but not the warmth it threw onto a sleeping face. The cave wall remains, but not the hide that may have hung near an opening. A patch of burned ground remains, but not the smell of damp wood or the decision to move fuel closer before dawn. Archaeology lets us see traces of behaviour, but behaviour itself was always richer than the trace. At some Neanderthal sites, patterns of hearths and activity areas suggest that space was used with practical order. A hearth might appear not as a single accident, but as part of a repeated living surface. Around it, tools, bones, and burned materials can show where work gathered. In places where preservation is especially good, archaeologists can sometimes discuss zones of activity with more confidence. Still, even then, a zone is not a full room, a pattern is not a photograph. The evidence gives shape, not certainty. That uncertainty should make the shelter more interesting, not less. It reminds you that the home was partly made from things that rarely survive. Smell, warmth, wetness, closeness, timing, and social need were central to the shelter, yet they are difficult to recover from the ground. The cold that shaped every decision does not leave a neat label beside the hearth. It has to be inferred from climate, season, site location, animal remains, tools, fuel traces, and the known abilities of bodies trying to stay alive. A cave in a cold region may have protected a group from wind, but that does not mean it was always warm. A hearth in a shelter may show fire use, but not exactly how smoke behaved on a particular night. Stone tools associated with hides may suggest work on animal skins, but not the exact final form of every covering. Animal bones can tell us what was butchered or eaten, but not every way the skin, fat, sinew, or bone entered the shelter's domestic life. Every object speaks, but none speaks alone. A scraper near a hearth means more when paired with animal remains, useware, repeated occupation, and the practical demands of cold. Charcoal means more when considered with the shape of the shelter, the need for heat, and the problem of smoke. Bedding traces, where they survive, mean more when placed beside the body's need to avoid direct contact with freezing ground. Archaeology is a slow conversation between fragments, not a single clear voice. This also means that not every Neanderthal shelter should be imagined the same way. Some groups used caves, some used rock shelters, some lived or worked in open-air settings, where traces are harder to interpret or preserve. A cold season camp in one region would not match a milder season camp somewhere else. A shelter used briefly during movement would not have the same floor pattern as a place returned to many times. A cave mouth facing one kind of wind would create different choices from a protected overhang above a valley. The Neanderthal world was not one cave repeated across Europe. It was a wide range of landscapes, climates, seasons, and local materials. Forest edges, open steppe, limestone shelters, river valleys, high cold places, milder refuges, and shifting animal routes all shaped how a group could live. The same broad needs returned again and again: warmth, dryness, fuel, visibility, protection, sleep. But the answers changed with place. A good script about their homes must avoid turning one site into every site, or one survival method into a universal rule. That caution is especially important with the word built. Neanderthals could use and modify space. They could control fire, make and maintain tools, process animals, and occupy shelters in organised ways. Some extraordinary evidence even suggests that Neanderthals were capable of creating constructed arrangements in deep cave settings. But that does not mean their ordinary cold-weather homes should be imagined as cabins, villages, or permanent houses. The safer, truer image is a shelter system. Natural protection improved by repeated human action. A system can be sophisticated without looking like architecture. A hearth placed well is design. A hide hung to slow wind is design. A sleeping area kept away from dampness is design. Fuel sorted by dryness is design. Ash used to preserve embers is design. Bodies arranged so the vulnerable are closer to warmth is design. These choices do not need straight walls to be intelligent. They only need consequences. In extreme cold, a good choice is remembered because it helps the group wake again. Still, the story must keep its humility. We can say that Neanderthals likely made cold shelters livable through fire, place choice, hides, bedding, and social routine. We can say that they were capable, adaptive, and attentive to their environments. We can say that the evidence does not support the old cartoon of stupid cave dwellers crouching helplessly in the dark. But we should also say that many details remain uncertain, and that uncertainty is not a weakness. It is part of respecting the past. The firelight in the cave does not show everything at once. It shows a scraper, but not every hand that used it. It shows ash, but not every night it saved. It shows a wall blackened by smoke, but not every breath taken beneath it. It shows bone, stone, and charcoal. While the hide has gone, the bedding has gone, the sleepers have gone, and the cold itself has moved on. Yet enough remains to understand the shape of the need. A body wanted warmth. A group needed a centre. A place had to be chosen, altered, watched, and remembered. The cave was never merely a cave. It was a record written in hard materials after all the soft ones had vanished. And as the embers settle again beneath the ash, you can feel the truth that archaeology can only partly hold. The home was real, even when almost everything that made it feel like home has disappeared. There is one cave that reminds us to be careful with every simple picture of Neanderthal life. Far from the ordinary light of a cave mouth, deep inside Bruniquel Cave, in what is now southwestern France, pieces of broken stalagmite were arranged in rings and other forms, long before modern cities, farms, or written memory. The structures were made in darkness, where no daylight entered. Fire was used there. The work required movement through the cave, selection and breaking of mineral formations, placement, and shared effort. It is not a warm domestic scene. It is not a winter bedroom. But it matters because it shows that Neanderthals could organise space in ways that go beyond crouching beneath a rock ledge. This does not mean we should turn every Neanderthal shelter into a built house. That would be the wrong lesson. The deeper lesson is more interesting. Neanderthals were capable of planning with place. They could notice, remember, arrange, and transform a space for a purpose. In an ordinary cold shelter, that purpose may have been warmth, sleep, tool repair, hide work, food sharing, or protection from wind. In a deep cave setting, the purpose may have been something different, and we should not pretend to know more than the evidence allows. But the ability to shape space was there. Once you understand that, the cave mouth where the group sleeps begins to feel less accidental. The hearth is not random. The bedding is not random. The repeated use of a dry zone is not random. The darkened roof above a fire is not merely stain. The objects near the heat are not simply scattered. Some of the pattern may come from convenience, some from habit, some from the shape of the cave, some from generations of experience with wind, smoke, dampness, and cold. It is not architecture in the modern sense, but it is spatial intelligence. To survive severe cold, intelligence does not have to look monumental. It may look like placing a hearth where the smoke can escape without losing all the heat. It may look like keeping the most useful hide near enough to reach in the dark. It may look like choosing a shelter where the morning sun, if it appears, touches the entrance sooner. It may look like rejecting a cave that seems large and impressive because the floor is wet, or because animal signs make it unsafe, or because fuel is too far away. A good shelter is not always the grandest shelter. A wide cave can be too drafty. A deep chamber can be too smoky. A low rock overhang can be excellent if it breaks the wind and stays dry. A narrow entrance can protect heat but trap air. A sheltered ledge can become useful for a short stay, while a larger cave may serve as a repeated camp in another season. Place is judged through the body. The body asks simple questions that become complex when winter answers them back. Where does the wind enter? Where does smoke go? Where can a tired body sleep without losing heat into the ground? Where can work happen after daylight is gone? Where can tools be kept safe from feet and children? Where can fuel dry without burning? Where can the group see outward? Each answer changes the shape of the home. This is why the idea of building in Neanderthal life should be widened, not exaggerated. Building does not always mean raising walls. Sometimes it means arranging what already exists. Sometimes it means adding a windbreak of hide, branch, or stone. Sometimes it means banking ash around embers. Sometimes it means placing bodies in relation to fire. Sometimes it means turning a natural hollow into a reliable place for work and sleep through repeated use. The hand that breaks a stalagmite deep underground and places it with others is not doing the same thing as the hand that shifts a hide across a cave mouth. But both hands belong to a mind capable of making space meaningful. Still, the cold shelter remains humble. There are no straight beams, no fitted stones, no carved doorway. If wooden frames, hide screens, or brush structures were sometimes used, many would have vanished without leaving clear traces. Organic materials are poor witnesses across tens of thousands of years. What survives can make the shelter seem barer than it was. At the same time, that gap in preservation is not permission to invent whatever we like. A careful story stays close to what is likely, useful, and consistent with known behaviour. The firelit cave does not need fantasy to become impressive. It is already impressive that a group could make a livable night from such stubborn materials. Stone, smoke, hide, ash, fuel, bone, breath, and darkness. Nothing soft enough, nothing sealed enough, nothing cleanly separate from weather. Yet arranged together, watched through the night, and adjusted by experience, these materials could hold back enough cold for sleep to happen. Think of the shelter as a set of circles. The widest circle is the landscape. Open country, animal paths, fuel sources, water, stone, weather, and danger. Inside that is the chosen place. Cave, overhang, hollow, or protected edge. Inside that is the working shelter, entrance, hearth, dry floor, tool space, bedding, hides, refuse, fuel. Inside that is the sleeping circle, bodies close enough to share warmth, coverings pulled tight, the vulnerable brought inward. And at the centre is not a throne, not a bed, not a wall, but the ember bed. This centre is small, it can fit beneath ash, it can be hidden by grey dust and still carry life. It can be lost through neglect, rain, wind, or lack of fuel. It can also be protected, carried in memory if not always physically, renewed from spark and coal, and used to make the cave become more than geology. Around that centre, space is organised. Around that centre, labour gathers. Around that centre, the shelter becomes social. That is why the most important built thing may not be a wall at all. It may be the hearth. A hearth is a constructed place, even when it looks simple. It is chosen, cleared, fed, cleaned, reused, and remembered. It changes the floor. It changes the ceiling. It changes where people sit. It changes where tools are used. It changes the path of air. It creates a warm side and a cold side, a smoky side and a clearer side, a working side and a sleeping edge. The hearth builds invisible rooms out of heat, light, and discomfort. The cave wall behind it becomes a partner. The entrance becomes a problem. The roof becomes a smoke path. The floor becomes a record. Hides become movable boundaries. Bodies become insulation. Tools become maintenance. Fuel becomes stored time. This is not architecture drawn in lines. It is architecture felt through need. Perhaps that is why Neanderthal shelter feels so close when you slow down enough to imagine it properly. It is not because it resembles your home. It is because it reveals what your home usually hides. Warmth is made. Dryness is made. Safety is made. Sleep is made. The modern house conceals the labour in walls, pipes, machines, markets, and distant fuel. The Neanderthal shelter keeps the labour visible. Every comfort has a handprint on it. As the night continues, someone lifts their head near the hearth and looks toward the cave mouth. The wind has shifted again. The hide at the entrance moves against its stones. Smoke leans differently under the roof. No one needs to give the shelter a name. It is enough to read it. The cave, like the deep chambers where Neanderthals once arranged stone in darkness, is a place altered by intention. Here, the intention is simple and profound. Keep warmth, keep breathe, keep the group alive until dawn. The hardest test of the shelter comes when the system is under pressure, not at the beginning of the night, when the fire is bright and bodies are still alert. Not in the first hour after settling, when the cave still holds the day's movement and the hearth has a clear red heart. The hardest time comes later, when fatigue has lowered everyone into shallow sleep, when the fuel pile is smaller than it was, when dampness has crept into the edges of bedding, and when the cold outside has had many hours to press against the cave mouth. Before dawn, even a good shelter feels thinner. The fire may still live, but only in pieces. A coal glows beneath grey ash. A charred branch breaks quietly and settles lower. The strongest flames are gone. Light no longer fills the wall, it trembles close to the ground. The air above the hearth is warm enough to matter, but not warm enough to solve anything. Smoke hangs differently now, less forceful, more uncertain. The cave roof, blackened by earlier nights, receives it without hurry. This is when every earlier choice returns. The place where the hearth was built, the fuel saved or wasted, the hide waited near the entrance, the bedding chosen from the driest material available, the sharp flakes moved away from the sleeping ground, the child placed nearer the centre, the older body given a little more shelter from the floor, the person who sleeps lightly enough to wake when the fire changes. All of these choices, made separately, gather into one question. Will the home last until morning? A modern house answers that question silently. The roof does not ask for attention at 3 in the morning. The wall does not need to be fed. The heating system may hum without your hand touching it. But here, the answer is never automatic. The shelter continues only because someone is close enough to notice its weakness. A sleeper near the hearth stirs. At first, it is only a change in breath. The body feels what the mind has not yet named. The warmth on one side has fallen. Cold air has strengthened along the floor. The hide over the shoulder is still there, but the pocket beneath it has cooled. The hand comes out slowly, not because anyone wants to wake, but because the night has made a demand. The fingers find ash first, warm on the surface in some places, dead in others. The hand searches with care. A coal can burn skin. A dead patch can fool the tired mind. Then the fingers close around a piece of wood left near the hearth for this moment. A small piece, not the largest, because a low fire needs to be coaxed rather than smothered. The wood is nudged inward. The ember bed is opened slightly. A faint red grows. This is not a heroic act. It is maintenance. But maintenance is what stands between sleep and danger. If the fire fails completely, the cave does not instantly become lethal. The stone still blocks wind, the hides still cover bodies, the group still shares warmth, but the margin narrows. Dampness begins to matter more. Breath condenses, fingers stiffen, a child may wake. Someone already tired may lose the chance to recover. Tools may be harder to use in the cold morning. Hides may dry less well. Meat or other materials may remain harder to manage. One failure touches the next. Cold rarely arrives as one dramatic blow. It accumulates. It enters where the windbreak sags. It gathers in bedding that was not dry enough. It deepens where the firelight no longer reaches. It makes old aches sharper. It turns small movements into effort. It punishes the person who must leave the warm cluster to gather more fuel or check the entrance. It makes the whole shelter feel larger, because warmth has shrunk. A small group knows this through experience. They may not measure temperature. They may not speak of heat loss in abstract terms. But they know when the fire is too low. They know when breath feels wrong. They know when smoke has become too thick or when the cave has become too cold. They know that wet skin against a covering is dangerous, that damp ground steals sleep, that hunger makes the body poorer at defending itself. They know that the shelter is not one protection, but many protections layered together, and that pressure finds the weakest layer first. This pressure can come from weather, but also from scarcity. A cave near good hunting or travel routes may still become difficult if fuel is limited. A protected hollow may lose value if the group must walk too far for wood, brush, roots, or other burnable material. Carrying fuel costs energy. Burning it too quickly wastes future warmth. Saving it too strictly risks a miserable night. The shelter sits inside this economy of effort. Every flame is purchased somewhere else, by walking, gathering, breaking, carrying, drying, and choosing. Fuel is warmth before it becomes fire. A piece of wood near the hearth is stored sleep. A bundle of brush is time against the cold. A dry branch is a promise that can still fail if wind shifts or smoke thickens. When fuel is scarce, the shelter changes. Fires may be smaller. Bodies may cluster closer. Hides become more important. Bedding must work harder. The group may choose a different shelter, move earlier than desired, or endure more cold to preserve resources. The home is not only shaped by walls and hearths, it is shaped by what the surrounding land can continue to give. Then there is smoke. When the system is under pressure, smoke can become cruel. Add damp fuel to a low fire, and warmth may come slowly while smoke arrives at once. Block the entrance too well against wind, and smoke may linger. Open it too much, and heat escapes. A person half awake in the dark has to make practical decisions with tired eyes and a cold hand. Move the hide, feed the fire, endure the smoke, wake someone else. Wait. There is no perfect answer, only the least costly one. This is the emotional contradiction at the center of the shelter. The things that save you also trouble you. Fire warms and burns. Smoke helps dry and preserve, but stings and chokes. Hides cover the body, but trap smell and dampness. Caves protect from weather, but hold cold stone and darkness. Closeness preserves heat, but removes privacy and deep rest. Survival is not a clean victory over nature. It is a series of compromises made while tired. And still, the system works often enough. It works because one person wakes, because another gathered extra fuel before night, because a hide was repaired rather than discarded, because a child was moved before getting too cold, because an old sleeping place was avoided after dampness was remembered, because embers were banked under ash, because the group's habits were shaped by nights that punished mistakes. The fire catches a little more. Not much. Enough. A small line of flame licks the edge of the new wood, then disappears, then returns. The sleeper keeps one hand near the warmth until feeling comes back into the fingers. Someone nearby shifts under a hide and settles again. The cave wall glows faintly, just for a moment, revealing the rough roof, the dark smoke stain, the lowered heads of sleeping bodies, and the uneven ground that has held all this labour. Outside, the cold remains stronger than the shelter. It always has been, but strength is not the same as arrival. The cold presses. The cave slows it. The fire interrupts it. The hides confuse it. The bedding lifts bodies away from it. The group shares what heat remains. Under pressure, the home does not become perfect. It becomes visible. Every part shows its purpose because every part is being tested. The ember brightens under ash again, and the shelter holds. When the shelter holds through the hardest hours, it does not mean the group can stay forever. A cave can feel permanent because stone seems permanent. It waits in the hillside while storms pass, while animals move, while generations of plants grow and die near its entrance. But the life inside it is not fixed in the same way. Neanderthal groups were not furniture placed inside caves. They moved through landscapes, followed animal patterns, searched for workable stone, gathered fuel, watched water, remembered danger, and returned to useful places when those places still answered their needs. A home, in this world, could be strong for one season and wrong for another. The same cave that protects a winter camp from wind may be damp in thaw. A rock shelter that works for a short stay may become poor when nearby fuel is exhausted. A place close to animals in one season may sit empty of prey in the next. A shelter that faces morning light may be good in cold, but too exposed in another weather pattern. A floor that felt dry last time may darken with water after snowmelt. The land changes the value of every shelter, so adaptation is not only what happens inside the cave, it also happens when the group leaves it. Leaving does not mean failure. It can be the intelligent end of a good shelter's use. The fire has done its work. The hides have protected as long as they can. The bedding has grown dirty or damp. The fuel nearby has become less convenient. The animals have shifted. The group's bodies need food more than they need the comfort of returning to the same stone wall. In a moving life, the ability to abandon shelter at the right time is as important as the ability to make it. Still, leaving a shelter is not simple. Everything useful must be considered. A hide is heavy, but too valuable to abandon casually. A good stone tool may be carried, sharpened, repaired, or replaced depending on its condition. Fuel is usually too bulky to move far, unless a specific piece matters for fire carrying or immediate use. Bedding may be left behind if it is common or damp, yet the memory of good bedding material travels with the group. Ash stays. Bones stay. Charcoal stays. Some broken tools stay. The cave keeps what is no longer worth carrying. This is why an archaeological site can look like abandonment, even when it was really selection. The living group took what mattered most for movement. The ground received what was too broken, too heavy, too used, or no longer needed. A hearth left behind was not a forgotten fireplace in a ruined house. It was the remains of an event, a circle of warmth that had done its work, a patch of earth altered by nights of attention and then released back to cold. Imagine the morning of departure after many cold nights. The shelter is no longer fully asleep. The fire is low but useful. Pale light reaches the cave mouth, turning the edge of the entrance grey. The wind has softened or changed direction, Bodies rise slowly because cold mornings do not invite sudden movement. A hide is lifted and shaken. Frost or ash falls from its edge. A tool is found where it was placed near the working area. A child, or a smaller body, is pulled into wakefulness before the warmth is gone completely. The cave becomes a place of sorting. What goes? What stays? What can be repaired later? What must be used now? What is too damp? What still holds smell? What carries warmth for another hour beneath a hide? What can be wrapped, dragged, tied, or held? No pack looks neat in the modern sense. Objects belong to bodies, hands, shoulders, and memory more than to containers. The home begins to come apart because it was always partly made of movable things. A skin that was a wall in the night becomes a burden in the morning. A covering becomes a bundle. A tool becomes a carried edge. A leftover bone becomes refuse, or perhaps something useful, depending on its condition and the group's needs. The hearth becomes ash again. The cave mouth becomes an exit. This change tells us something important about Neanderthal shelter. The home was not only a defense against cold, it was part of a wider rhythm of movement and return. A group might know several places across a territory. Some could serve as hunting stops, some as short camps, some as places for working stone or processing animals, some as cold season shelters where the land offered enough protection, fuel, and access to food. The shape of life was not a single house in a single location, but a memory map of usable places. Shelter was not one address, it was knowledge spread across terrain. That knowledge had to be taught without paper. A younger member learns that a certain overhang is useful when wind comes from one direction. Another place is avoided after heavy rain. A cave with old smoke stains may promise shelter, but also warn that others have found it useful, including animals or humans. A good stone source changes the route. A valley that holds animals in one season may be empty later. The body learns distance, slope, exposure, smell, and sound. The mind remembers where warmth was possible. This is adaptation at the scale of landscape. The shelter inside the cave teaches one lesson. The movement between shelters teaches another. A cold night asks for heat. A cold season asks for planning. A lifetime asks for memory. Neanderthals survive not by having one perfect answer to extreme cold, but by having many partial answers that could be combined. Fire, shelter choice, hides, tools, group care, mobility, and the ability to read changing conditions. Even their bodies were part of this adaptation. Neanderthals had robust builds, with strong limbs and broad forms, often discussed in relation to cold environments and demanding physical lives. But a body suited to cold is not a magical shield. It still needs food. It still loses heat. It still suffers from dampness, fatigue, injury, and hunger. Biology may help, but shelter remains necessary. A strong body can endure more, yet even strength needs a place to sleep. And sleep is one of the quiet reasons shelter matters so much. Without some protected rest, hunting becomes harder. Tool-making becomes clumsier. Judgment weakens. The injured heal poorly. Children suffer more. Cold does not only threaten life in one dramatic instant, it wears down the decisions that keep life possible. A shelter that allows even broken sleep can preserve the next day's ability to move, follow tracks, carry fuel, repair tools, and choose again. That is the rhythm. Choose, make, sleep, repair, move, remember. A Neanderthal home is therefore not a single cave glowing in isolation. It is one pause in a chain of places. Behind it are earlier fires, earlier roots, earlier mistakes, earlier returns. Ahead of it are other hollows, other winds, other floors, other hearths not yet made. The group carries parts of home with them, tools, hides, habits, fire knowledge, and the memory of what cold feels like when a shelter fails. As the morning opens, the cave begins to lose its night shape. Without sleeping bodies clustered around the hearth, the warm centre weakens. Without hides at the entrance, the boundary thins. Without tools in use, The working places become ordinary patches of ground. The cave remains, but the home is leaving. It goes out through the mouth of the shelter, in the hands and on the shoulders of the people who made it. A final ember may be buried, scattered, or left to fade, depending on need and circumstance. Ash clings to the ground. Smoke smell clings to hair and hide. The blackened stone holds its mark. The cold air enters more freely now, crossing the floor where bodies lay through the night. The shelter has not failed. It has finished its task. For a while, the cave becomes stone again, waiting without intention. Then perhaps another group returns, or the same group comes back when season and need align. They will find the hollow, test the wind, read the floor, and decide whether the place can become home once more. By the time the shelter reaches its quietest hour, survival no longer looks like effort. It looks like stillness. Bodies lie close under hides that have been shifted and tightened through the night. The fire is low, but not gone. Smoke rises in a thinner thread now, less like a cloud and more like a memory of heat. The cave mouth holds a dim greyness that may be the first sign of morning, or only the cold sky beginning to lighten beyond the hill. No one celebrates. No one declares that the night has been conquered. The group has only crossed another narrow bridge between darkness and day. This is the quiet climax of the shelter, not a dramatic rescue, not a battle with the weather, not a triumphant invention of the house, just the nearly invisible fact that the system worked. The hearth held enough warmth, the hides held enough air, the bedding kept enough cold from rising through the body, the cave slowed enough wind, the group shared enough labour, the sleepers woke enough times, shifted enough coverings, fed enough fuel, and remembered enough old discomforts that morning is now possible. In a world like this, enough is a powerful word. Enough warmth does not mean comfort. It means the hands can move. Enough sleep does not mean restfulness. It means the body can stand. Enough shelter does not mean safety. It means the cold did not take more than the group could spare. The home has not created luxury. It has created a margin, a little space in which life continues. Near the hearth, someone opens their eyes without lifting their head. The first awareness is not thought, but sensation. The cheek is warm on one side and cold on the other. The throat tastes of smoke. The hip knows the hardness beneath the bedding. A foot has slipped partly from under the hide and gone numb at the edge of the warm cluster. The body gathers itself slowly, as if returning from a place where every part had been watching the cold separately. A hand pulls the foot back under cover. The movement wakes another sleeper, just enough to turn away from the draft. A child, or smaller body, presses nearer to the centre. Someone breathes out, and the hide above the mouth lifts slightly, then settles. Around the group, the shelter holds the marks of the night's labour. Ash has been disturbed. A piece of wood lies half-burned where it was pushed in during the darkest hours. A scraper sits near a hide whose edge was worked before sleep. A stone has rolled slightly from the entrance barrier, but still holds part of the covering down. Nothing is perfect. Everything is useful. This is the part of Neanderthal shelter that deserves the most respect. Its success is not in looking impressive. Its success is in reducing harm. A cave that keeps the wind off sleeping bodies has done something valuable. A hide that traps a little warmth has done something valuable. A bed of plant matter, ash, or skins that slows the cold floor has done something valuable. A hearth that preserves embers through the night has done something valuable. Even a rough windbreak that leaks air in many places may be the difference between broken sleep and no sleep at all. The cold has not disappeared. It waits in the edges. It sits in the stone. It hangs near the entrance. It has entered. Fingers, toes, old injuries, damp materials, and places where coverings thinned. But it has not taken the centre completely. That is the achievement. The home has created a small, temporary middle where bodies can recover enough to keep moving through the next day. This middle is made from cooperation. No one survives the night only by owning a good hide or finding a good corner. The shelter's success belongs to the group's combined attention. One person's fuel warms another. One person's tool work becomes another's covering. One person's memory of smoke prevents another's coughing. One person's choice to sleep near the draught protects someone more vulnerable. Even the person who appears to be doing nothing while asleep is part of the warm mass that makes the group easier to protect. The body is not separate from architecture here. A line of sleepers can change the temperature beneath a hide. A shoulder can block air for a child. A person lying close to the hearth can notice when it weakens. A tired hand can save an ember that warms everyone later. Modern comfort often lets people forget how much one body can matter to another body. In this cave, that truth is close enough to feel. The emotional weight of the shelter is quiet because it is ordinary. This was not one extraordinary night, imagined for drama. Cold shelters were made useful again and again through practical repetition. The same types of decisions returned with every season of hard weather. Where to place fire, how to manage smoke, what to dry, what to carry, what to leave, who needed the warmest place, whether the shelter still served the group, or whether movement had become necessary. Survival was not one invention, it was ongoing adjustment, and because it was ongoing, it could look almost calm. A person who has lived many nights near a hearth does not stare at fire with wonder every time it burns. They use it. They distrust it. They depend on it. They learn its moods. A person who has slept under hides does not think of them as symbols of prehistoric life. They think with the body, dry or damp, heavy or thin, smoky or clean enough, warm enough or failing. A cave is not a museum. It is a working place, a resting place, a place that may be good tonight and wrong later. The grey at the entrance grows slightly clearer. Morning does not rush into the cave. It gathers outside first, then touches the threshold. The shelter's inner world begins to loosen. Shapes that belonged to firelight take on another kind of form. The hide near the entrance no longer seems like a wall, but like an object again. The hearth no longer dominates the eye as completely. Stone tools on the ground become easier to see. Bone fragments, ash patches, bedding, and bodies separate from the larger darkness. The home begins to return to pieces. This happens every morning. What was one system in the night becomes many objects in daylight. The covering must be lifted. The bedding must be judged. The fire must be fed, moved, or allowed to fade. Tools must be gathered. A damp patch must be noticed. A hide may need drying again. The shelter that seemed to hold everyone together in darkness now asks to be broken back into tasks. The quiet climax has passed because the home has done what it had to do. It kept enough warmth until waking. That may sound small from inside a modern room, but in the long cold of Ice Age Europe, small margins were not small. A little more sleep could mean steadier hands. Steadier hands could mean a better tool edge, cleaner hidework, more careful butchery, safer movement, sharper attention to tracks or weather. A little warmth preserved at dawn could shape the whole day. The shelter's success spreads outward from the cave. It begins with a body able to rise, then a hand able to grip, then a group able to move, repair, gather, and decide. The home is not separate from hunting, travel, care, food, tool-making, or memory. It is the nightly route that feeds all of them. Without a place to reduce the cold, every other skill becomes harder. Near the hearth, the last red places glow under ash. Someone sits up slowly, pulling a hide around the shoulders before the colder air can take hold. Their breath enters the dim morning as a pale cloud. For a moment they stay still, listening to the world outside the cave. The wind is quieter now, or perhaps the stone only makes it seem far away. The shelter has held, not perfectly, not comfortably, but honestly, by the old rules of cold, fire, skin, stone, and shared sleep. And in that honest holding, the first work of morning can begin. Morning does not enter the shelter all at once. It begins as a thinning of darkness near the cave mouth, a faint grey loosening the hard edge between stone and sky. The fire still matters, but it no longer owns the room as completely as it did in the deepest part of the night. Shapes that were only red and black become brown, pale, smoky, and uneven. The hide near the entrance shows its rough surface. The ash shows footprints, hand marks, and places where coals were moved. The bedding looks less like a warm nest now, and more like the scattered materials it always was. The home begins to separate into pieces. This is the slow descent toward rest ending. Not the rest of sleep, because sleep has already been broken and borrowed through the night, but the rest of a completed task. The cave has done what it could. The fire has held long enough. The bodies have stayed warm enough. The night's labour no longer has to be hidden inside stillness. It can now unfold into morning work. Someone sits up with a hide around the shoulders. The movement is careful because cold rushes into every space the covering leaves open. The body that has been curled through the night opens slowly, joint by joint. A hand reaches toward the hearth, not to build a great fire, but to learn what remains. Ash is shifted. A coal answers with a dull red glow. That glow changes the morning. It means the group does not have to begin again from nothing. The ember is a gift from the night to the day. Around it, the shelter wakes in small sounds. A foot scraping the ground. A cough softened by smoke. A hide lifted and shaken once. A stone tool found by touch before it is clearly seen. A child or smaller body resisting the loss of warmth. Someone rubbing hands together before beginning a task. No sound is large. The cave keeps them close and low. Outside, the air is likely colder than it looks. Pale light can deceive the body. It makes the world visible without making it kind. Frost may still hold the ground. Wind may still move beyond the entrance. Water, if nearby, may be edged with ice or difficult to reach. Fuel gathered yesterday may be nearly gone. The day ahead is not a release from survival. It is only a change in the kind of survival required. Inside, the first work is to preserve what can be preserved. The fire is checked before anyone forgets it. Hides are examined by touch. Damp here, warmer there. Too close to smoke. Stiff at the edge. Bedding is judged. If it is dry enough, it may be kept, shaken, rearranged, or carried in part. If it is damp, fouled, or too common to save, it may be left for the ground to reclaim. Tools are gathered. A sharp edge is safer in the hand than hidden where a bare foot might find it later. The shelter that felt like one living thing at night becomes a list of questions in daylight. What still warms? What still cuts? What still covers? What still carries? What is useful enough to take? What is too heavy? What is too damaged? What will be needed again when evening returns? These questions do not need spoken language in the form you use now. They are present in movement. A hide folded rather than abandoned. A tool tucked close. A piece of usable fuel set aside. A broken flake ignored. A damp clump of bedding kicked away from the sleeping place. A hand placed briefly near the cave wall, feeling whether the stone has kept any warmth at all. It has not kept much. Stone gives back slowly, and by morning, its gift is nearly gone. The wall that seemed protective in darkness is cold again under the palm. The floor where bodies lay is marked by pressure, but not softened for long. The cave has no affection. It does not hold comfort after the people stop making it. This is part of its honesty. It offered shape, not mercy. The mercy came from work. Smoke smell remains on everything. Hair carries it, hides carry it, skin carries it. The cave roof carries it most visibly, blackened over time where fires have breathed upward. To a modern mind, smoke may seem like dirt or discomfort alone. Here it is also evidence of warmth, drying, preservation, and repeated return. It marks the place where nights were made possible, even when those nights were full of coughing, stinging eyes, and uneasy sleep. The group moves slowly because speed wastes warmth before the body is ready. Someone brings a small flame back from the coal, or simply strengthens the ember bed enough to warm hands and prepare for the day. Someone else draws a covering tighter while stepping toward the entrance to look out. At the threshold, the difference between inside and outside becomes clear again. The cave did not create true warmth, it created a delay. Outside is the world that had been waiting all night. It waits without anger. It waits because it is simply larger. The land beyond the shelter holds tracks, weather, food, danger, stone, fuel, water, and distance. It also holds the reason the shelter cannot remain the whole world. A group may need to hunt, gather, scout, repair, move, or return to a known place. The cave is a center only for a while. Morning stretches the circle outward again. Still, before leaving or beginning the day's work, there is a moment when the shelter can be seen plainly. The hearth is the center, but not a grand one. Just ash, coal, char, warmed dirt, and a few pieces of fuel. Around it lie the traces of night, pressed bedding, disturbed hides, tools close to use, bones or scraps that must be managed, stones holding down what wind tried to lift. Nothing resembles a house, and yet everything tells you a home happened here. A home happened in the way the group made cold less complete. It happened in the choice of a dry floor. It happened in the fire kept alive beneath ash. It happened in the hide pulled over a shoulder before cold could take too much. It happened in the sleeping body used as shelter for another. It happened in the rough boundary at the cave mouth, in the smoke-dark roof, in the scraper beside the worked skin, in the ember that survived long enough to spare the morning from beginning empty. As the grey light strengthens, the night's intimacy begins to fade. Bodies separate. Coverings become objects. The worn cluster loosens into individual tasks. The sleeping circle breaks. Someone steps over the place where another person lay. The air moves more freely between them. Privacy, such as it is, returns not through walls but through movement. Each person becomes more separate as heat becomes less urgent. The cave accepts this without changing. It held the group close because the night required closeness. Now it lets them spread, sort, gather, and prepare. The same space that was a sleeping shelter becomes a working shelter again. The same hearth that guarded the night becomes a morning tool. The same hide that was a wall becomes something to carry, dry, or wrap. The descent is gentle because nothing ends sharply here. Night becomes morning by degrees. Shelter becomes labour by degrees. Home becomes objects by degrees. The cold becomes manageable, not because it weakens, but because light allows work to resume. And work, more than comfort, is what this shelter has always promised. Near the entrance, a hide lifts in the wind and falls back against its stones. The sound is soft, almost like breathing. Behind it, the hearth glows low in the ash. A hand reaches down and covers part of that glow, protecting it for another moment. The cave grows lighter. The fire grows quieter. The night loosens its hold, and the fragile home begins to open itself back into the day. The fire that carried the night is almost hidden now. At first glance, it looks like ash. Grey, soft, collapsed into itself, no longer bright enough to rule the cave wall. But beneath that pale covering, a few red places remain. They are small and patient. If a hand moves too quickly, they vanish under dust. If a breath or twig reaches them correctly, they answer. This is how the shelter ends, not with a final blaze, but with warmth held quietly inside what looks spent. The cold still waits outside the cave mouth. It has waited all night. It waited while bodies curled under hides. It waited while smoke darkened the roof. It waited while wood became ember, while hands adjusted coverings, while sleepers turned toward one another without fully waking. It never needed to rush. Cold is patient because it belongs to the whole landscape. The shelter only borrowed a little space from it. That borrowed space is what Neanderthal home meant in severe weather, not ownership, not comfort as you know it, not a house standing separate from the world. A home was a managed pocket of warmth inside a much larger cold. It was a cave mouth chosen with care, a hearth kept alive, hides worked and carried, bedding kept from dampness, fuel saved for the darkest hours, bodies placed close enough to help one another, and memory guiding the same small acts again and again. The shelter was never one invention, it was many acts agreeing for a while. Now that morning has entered, the agreement loosens. A hide that blocked wind is lifted from its stones. The stones stay where they are, ordinary again. Bedding that held the body away from cold ground is shaken, sorted, or left. Tools are gathered from the places where firelight made work possible. A scraper goes with the group because its edge can help make warmth again somewhere else. Ash stays because ash has no legs, no hand, no shoulder to carry it, only the memory of heat inside the ground. The cave keeps the heavy traces, charcoal, burned earth, broken stone, bone, smoke on the roof, perhaps a pattern that, many thousands of years later, someone will study and try to understand. But the most human parts leave or disappear. The warmth under a hide, the breath of sleepers, the low sound of a body shifting away from smoke, the small generosity of a warmer place given to someone who needed it more, the half-awake hand that saved an ember before dawn. These do not remain in the stone in any simple way, yet they were the home. That is the quiet lesson left by this cold shelter. The thing most worth remembering is not that Neanderthals lived in caves, because that is too flat and too easy. The thing worth remembering is that they turned difficult places into livable ones through attention. They did not need a modern house to understand space. They did not need a sealed door to know the value of a threshold. They did not need a chimney to learn the moods of smoke. They did not need a mattress to know that the ground steals heat. They did not need written plans to build a night around fire. Their homes were primitive only if the word is used with care. Early, yes. Rough, yes. Made from stone, skin, ash, wood, plant matter, bone, and bodies. But not mindless, not random, not the cartoon of dull creatures hiding from weather without skill. A cold shelter like this required judgment at every level, choosing the site, placing the hearth, managing smoke, keeping fuel, preparing hides, protecting children, preserving embers, and knowing when the shelter had served its purpose. The old home was not a place that removed danger. It was a place where danger was reduced enough for sleep. That may be a humbler achievement than building walls, but it is not a smaller one. In a world without central heat, without glass, without doors, without lamps, without thick woven blankets, without stored coal or cut timber or iron stoves, enough sleep could mean the difference between a group that moved well in the morning and a group that stumbled cold into the day. The shelter protected not just comfort, but future action. Hands that warmed at the hearth could work stone. Bodies that rested could walk, hunt, gather, carry, and remember. Everything begins again from that little margin. A person steps near the entrance and looks out. The light is stronger now, though still pale. The land beyond the cave has not softened because the group survived the night. Frost may remain on stone and grass. The wind may still search low places. Animals may be far away. Fuel may need to be found before evening. The day ahead will ask for strength the shelter has only partly restored. Behind them, the cave holds the smell of smoke and skin. For a few moments, the place is between meanings. It is not fully a night shelter anymore because the sleeping circle has broken. It is not fully empty either because the hearth still breathes under ash and the marks of bodies remain in bedding and dirt. This in-between state may be the closest the cave comes to memory. It shows what happened without keeping the living people in place. Then the group begins to move. A hide is folded across an arm or shoulder. A tool is taken up. A piece of useful material is inspected and kept. Something too worn or damp is left behind. Someone disturbs the ash one last time, perhaps to protect the ember, perhaps to scatter what is no longer needed, perhaps simply because the fire has become part of the morning's rhythm. The cave mouth brightens around them. The home is leaving in pieces. It leaves in the smell of smoke caught in hair. It leaves in the hide that was wall, blanket, and burden. It leaves in the stone edge that can make another skin useful. It leaves in the memory of which side of the shelter was colder, where smoke gathered, where the floor stayed dry, how the wind moved before dawn. It leaves in the bodies that learned again, through discomfort, how warmth is made. The cave remains behind, but not unchanged. There is darkening above the old hearth. There are fragments in the floor. There are traces that may outlast every soft thing by a span almost impossible to imagine. Long after the hides vanish, long after the bedding returns to earth, long after the people themselves are gone, the stone may still carry a faint record of fire. Someone in another age may kneel over the ash and bone and ask what kind of life happened there. The answer will never be complete, but it can be close enough to feel a group entered from the cold. They chose stone because stone slowed the wind. They made fire because fire interrupted darkness and cold together. They used hides because skin could become shelter after life had left it. They arranged bodies because warmth is stronger when shared. They watched smoke because a home can harm while it protects. They slept lightly because the fire needed them even while they needed it. They rose in the morning because the system held. That is enough. Not enough to fill every gap in the evidence. Not enough to pretend we know every custom or every shelter. But enough to understand that Neanderthal homes were not merely places found in nature. They were places made meaningful by repeated human-like care, by practical intelligence, by adaptation to cold, and by the small, stubborn refusal to let the night take everything. The last image is simple. A cave mouth in grey morning, a hearth low under ash, a hide smelling of smoke as it is lifted from the ground, stone tools gathered near the place where hands worked by firelight, the wind outside touching the entrance again, freer now that the barrier is gone, the warm centre shrinking, then fading, but not wasted, because it carried the group to daylight. For a moment, one ember still glows. It is easy to miss. It has no flame, no height, no drama. Just a red point under grey ash, soft as a breathing thing. Around it, the cave is cooling back into stone. Beyond it, the cold world opens. And between the two, for one more heartbeat, you can see what home was before houses. Warmth borrowed from fire, guarded by hands, shared by bodies, and returned each morning to the waiting earth.